My family has always believed in being prepared for anything. That's a nice way of saying we're probably a tad over the top about security, but when you grow up with certain expectations, you just roll with it. After a rather embarrassing incident involving a disgruntled former employee and a surprisingly limber paparazzi photographer scaling our estate walls, nothing truly dangerous, more just a loud, public nuisance, my father decided a new, more robust approach was needed. That's how I found myself sitting in the opulent, slightly intimidating main parlor, waiting to interview what felt like the 10th candidate for my personal security detail in as many weeks. My name is Zoe, and at 24, I'm ostensibly in charge of a significant portion of my family's foundation work, which means public appearances, travel, and generally being visible. It's a good life, don't get me wrong, but it certainly comes with its own unique set of requirements. The previous guards, bless their well-meaning hearts, were either too stiff, too chatty, or just didn't quite grasp the concept that I wasn't an inanimate object needing to be shielded from the sun. I needed someone who understood discretion, yet possessed an undeniable competence. The heavy oak doors creaked open, and a figure stepped in, instantly commanding the space. My eyes widened slightly, a genuine spark of interest igniting within me. This wasn't another suit-and-tie type. This was Camila. She stood tall, probably 5'10", with shoulders that spoke of deliberate strength, not just casual athleticism. Her dark hair was pulled back in a neat, severe bun, revealing a strong jawline and piercing hazel eyes that seemed to take in every detail of the room in one swift sweep. There was an understated power to her, a quiet intensity that was almost palpable. She wore a simple, well-fitted dark suit that did nothing to hide the lean, defined muscle beneath. Her posture was impeccable, a testament to years of rigorous training. She moved with a silent grace that belied her powerful build, yet every movement was precise, economical. She looked like she could handle anything, yet there was a deep well of stillness within her that I found profoundly intriguing. Miss Zoey Caldwell? Her voice was low, with a slight gravelly undertone, perfectly even, devoid of any discernible emotion. She didn't sound like she was asking a question, but rather stating a fact, awaiting confirmation. "That's me," I replied, a small smile playing on my lips. I gestured to the empty armchair opposite me. "Please have a seat, Camila." She moved, not a step wasted, and sat on the edge of the chair, back ramrod straight. Her hands rested on her knees, fingers interlocked, utterly still. My previous guards often fidgeted, crossed their legs, or made some attempt at small talk. Camila was a statue, alert and ready. "Thank you for seeing me, Miss Caldwell," she said, her gaze steady, meeting mine without wavering. "I understand the position requires a high level of discretion and protection. My background in military intelligence and specialized security protocols aligns well with these needs." She recited it like a mission brief. I nodded slowly, studying her. "Indeed. Your resume is impressive, Camila. A decorated veteran, Specialist Camila Reyes. Thank you for your service." A flicker, almost imperceptible, crossed her eyes. A brief tightening around her mouth, then it was gone. "It was my duty, Miss Caldwell." "And now your duty is to me, should you accept," I said, leaning forward slightly, a hint of playfulness in my tone. I wanted to see if I could make her crack, even a little. She didn't. Her expression remained perfectly composed. "If hired, I assure you, my commitment will be unwavering. Your safety and privacy will be my absolute priority. I am deeply grateful for this opportunity." Her gratitude was evident, but it was formal, almost like an official commendation. She truly seemed to view this as a serious, professional undertaking, a new mission. "Good to hear," I mused, leaning back again. My decision was already made. This woman, with her quiet strength and intense focus, was exactly what I needed. But more than that, there was a challenge here. Beneath that meticulous professionalism, that unwavering discipline, I sensed a person, a history, a story waiting to be uncovered. And I, Zoey Caldwell, was suddenly very much interested in being the one to find it. "You're hired, Camila," I said, a genuine smile gracing my face. "Start tomorrow. My assistant will brief you on the specifics. Welcome aboard." Her eyes, those sharp hazel eyes, softened by the smallest fraction for a second, a fleeting moment of relief before she locked down her emotions again. "Thank you, Miss Caldwell. I will not disappoint you." I watched her stand, salute with a subtle, almost military precision, and then exit the room with the same silent, purposeful stride. I knew, with a certainty that hummed through me, that life with Camila Reyes was going to be anything but dull. Her extreme formality, her meticulousness, I was already formulating a plan to chip away at that polished veneer. She was a fortress, and I was suddenly very curious about what lay within. The early days with Camila were, predictably, a masterclass in professional boundaries. She was a ghost, a shadow, always present but never intrusive. My morning coffee would be precisely at the right temperature, my car waiting, doors opened, always a minute before I needed it. She anticipated my needs with an uncanny efficiency, often before I even voiced them. She made the previous security team look like a troupe of amateur performers. I observed her constantly. Her hands, when not driving, often rested lightly on her lap, ready to move. Her eyes scanned every environment we entered, every person who approached. There was a constant, almost imperceptible vigilance about her, like a predator at rest. It was exhausting to imagine sustaining that level of awareness, yet she did it effortlessly, day in and day out. I quickly discovered her meticulousness extended beyond just security. My itinerary was flawlessly managed. She'd even started subtly suggesting better routes to avoid traffic or alternate, more discreet entrances to venues, always presented as a logical optimization, never a personal opinion. It was brilliant, truly. "Camila," I said one afternoon, as we drove through a particularly dreary part of the city on our way to a charity event. "You ever get tired of staring at the back of my head?" Her eyes flickered to the rearview mirror, meeting mine for a brief moment before returning to the road. "My focus is on the road, Miss Caldwell, and your surroundings. My purpose is to ensure your safe transit." Her voice was, as always, utterly devoid of inflection. I sighed dramatically. Right. Purpose. You know, it's okay to admit that sitting in traffic is boring. Even for a highly trained professional like yourself. A beat of silence. I find it an opportunity for observation and analysis of potential threats. I chuckled. "Of course you do. What about that squirrel, then? Was he a potential threat? Looked pretty shifty to me." Another moment of silence. "No, Miss Caldwell. Squirrels are not typically classified as a security threat. Unless they're trained for espionage," I mused, enjoying her absolute dedication to literal interpretation. "You never know. Maybe it's a new breed of furry, acorn-wielding assassins." She didn't respond, her profile unwavering. I could almost feel the precise calculations happening behind her stoic expression. I knew I wasn't going to get a laugh, or even a smile, from her yet. But I was patient. I was always patient when I wanted something. And I wanted to see what made Camila Reyes tick. Despite her unyielding professionalism, there were tiny cracks. Once, outside an art gallery, a particularly aggressive photographer lunged at me, not just for a photo, but attempting to grab a confidential folder I carried for a foundation meeting. Before I could react, Camila smoothly stepped between us, her body a formidable barrier. She didn't use force but moved with lightning speed, guiding the man away with a firm grip on his elbow, ensuring he couldn't reach me or the folder. Her movements were fluid, decisive, and shockingly fast. There was a quiet intensity in her eyes then, a focused fire that made it clear she was utterly serious about her commitment. It was a fleeting glimpse of the soldier beneath the polished exterior, and it resonated with a power I found deeply reassuring. I wasn't just safe with her. I felt protected in a way I hadn't before. It was a profound difference, and it made me appreciate her quiet strength even more. Weeks blurred into a rhythm, punctuated by my persistent, if subtle, attempts to bridge the professional chasm Camila had so carefully maintained. I started sharing more anecdotes, little glimpses into my own life, not in a demanding way, but just letting them spill out during long drives or waiting periods. I talk about my frustrations with board meetings, the ridiculousness of certain social expectations, or even just a funny observation about a painting I'd seen. She never interrupted, always listened. Sometimes, I'd catch her eyes in the rearview mirror, a moment of direct contact that felt surprisingly intimate despite the distance. In those fleeting instances, I felt a flicker of something beyond just professional attention, a quiet understanding. One rainy evening, we were stuck in traffic, the city lights reflecting off the slick streets. I was recounting a childhood story about a disastrous attempt at baking that ended with flour everywhere and a rather stern lecture from my grandmother. Camila, usually so focused on the road, let her gaze linger a little longer in the mirror. My grandmother, I continued, she was a force of nature. Very proper, very old world. She taught me how to tell a genuine antique from a fake just by feeling the texture. Camila's voice, usually so clipped, was softer than usual. My grandmother taught me how to clean a rifle. The unexpected admission hung in the air, a tiny window into a world so different from my own. I paused, genuinely taken aback. Really?
Yes.
She said precision was paramount, whether in the kitchen or the field. The brief crack in her armor sealed shut again, but the words were out. They painted a picture in my mind, a young Camila, not so different in age from me now, learning about discipline in a harsh, practical way. It made me wonder what other lessons her grandmother had imparted, what other aspects of her life had shaped her into this formidable, yet guarded woman. I found myself wanting to know more, but I also respected the fragile boundary she had just crossed. I didn't press. Instead, I shifted the conversation, telling her about a new gallery exhibit I was excited about, wondering if she had any interest in art. She politely declined, citing her lack of exposure to the subject, but there was a quiet curiosity in her voice that I hadn't heard before. It was these shared, quiet moments that slowly, almost imperceptibly, started to redefine our dynamic. There were no grand declarations, no overt shifts. It was the way the silence between us started to feel less like an empty space and more like a comfortable, unspoken language. During long drives, I'd sometimes catch her humming a low, almost inaudible tune. It wasn't a song I recognized, but it was a human sound, a small piece of herself escaping the rigid confines of her role. It was these tiny observations, these subtle gestures, that fueled my growing fascination with Camila. I was no longer just curious. I was captivated. My fascination with Camila deepened into something more profound than mere curiosity. I found myself actively strategizing ways to nudge her further out of her shell. It wasn't about being manipulative, not really. It was about seeing the real person beneath the uniform, the woman who learned to clean a rifle from her grandmother. I genuinely wanted to connect with her, to understand the quiet strength and the underlying sadness I sometimes glimpsed in her eyes. One afternoon, I decided on a slightly bolder approach. We were on our way to a fitting for a gala dress, and I was feeling particularly cooped up. "Camila," I said, leaning forward in the back seat. "You know, this is ridiculous. We've been driving for hours today. What do you say we take a detour? There's a small, independent coffee shop I've been meaning to try, just a few blocks from here."
I'll buy.
Her brow furrowed, a tiny crease appearing between her dark brows. "Miss Caldwell, our schedule is precise. Any deviation could impact subsequent appointments. Furthermore, I am on duty." "Oh, come on," I countered, a playful edge to my voice. "It's just coffee. 5 minutes. Consider it a field reconnaissance mission. Assess the coffee quality, the security of the establishment. It's strictly professional, I promise." I winked at her reflection in the mirror. She hesitated, her gaze darting from the road to the mirror. I could almost hear the internal debate, the clash between protocol and the unexpected request. "My duty is to ensure your schedule is maintained, Miss Caldwell." "And my duty," I said with a mock-serious tone, "is to ensure my security detail remains alert and well-caffeinated. Think of it as a strategic refuel." After a long pause, so subtle I almost missed it, she executed a perfect, smooth turn at the next intersection, veering off our planned route. Very well, Miss Caldwell. Strategic refuel accepted. But we will be swift. A small triumph. Inside the bustling coffee shop, she remained vigilant, of course, positioning herself so she had a full view of the entrance and myself. But she did accept the latte I ordered for her, sipping it slowly, her eyes still scanning. "This is good," she admitted, her voice low. It was the first time I had heard her offer an opinion on anything outside of work-related matters.
See?
Not everything I suggest is a catastrophe, I grinned. Sometimes, a little detour leads to something unexpected. Camila didn't reply directly, but I noticed her shoulders seemed a fraction less rigid. She was still on guard, but there was a subtle shift in her posture, a tiny relaxing of her formidable frame. It was a fleeting observation, but it filled me with a quiet satisfaction. The game, as I thought of it, was definitely on. I was trying to break through her careful construction, and she, I suspected, was becoming aware of my playful intentions, responding with a quiet, almost imperceptible resistance that was strangely endearing. I knew I was pushing her boundaries, and the quiet hum of something unfamiliar between us was becoming increasingly undeniable. The detours became more frequent, always small, always framed as a benefit to my schedule or an obscure reconnaissance mission. A walk through a quiet park to assess environmental security, a stop at a bookstore to gauge public interest in contemporary literature. Camila would acquiesce, her initial resistance slowly giving way to a quiet acceptance, though her vigilance never faltered. One evening, a critical business deal required me to pull an all-nighter at my home office. Papers were spread everywhere, screens glowed, and takeout containers littered the mahogany desk. Camila, as usual, remained discreetly in the living area, ever present. Around 2 a.m, exhausted and frustrated with a particular clause in a contract, I decided I needed a break. "Camila," I called out, my voice raspy with fatigue. "Come in here, please." She appeared in the doorway, her expression neutral. "Miss Caldwell?" "I need a fresh pair of eyes," I said, gesturing vaguely at the chaotic desk. "And probably some moral support. This clause on global infrastructure investment is making my head spin." She hesitated, her gaze flicking from me to the papers. "Miss Caldwell, I am not trained in legal or financial analysis." "I know that," I said, patting the empty chair beside me. "But you're incredibly observant. Tell me, what's your gut reaction to this phrase here?" I pointed to a dense paragraph. "Just tell me what it feels like to you. Don't analyze, just feel." Reluctantly, she moved closer, her presence a quiet anchor in the room. She leaned over the document, maintaining a respectful distance, but her insight was sharp. "The language here," she murmured, her voice steady, "it seems to leave room for interpretation. Too much room." I looked at her, grateful for the clarity. In the soft glow of the desk lamp, I saw the subtle shadows beneath her eyes, the faint hint of weariness that she usually concealed so well. Her hazel eyes, usually so sharp and guarded, seemed to hold a flicker of vulnerability, momentarily less focused on external threats and more on the words before us. The air between us thrummed with a new kind of intensity, not of professional duty, but of an unspoken connection. "Exactly," I said, relieved to have my own impression validated. "That's exactly what I felt." She stepped back slightly, her posture straightening as if reorienting to her role. She cleared her throat. "I should return my post, Miss Caldwell. You should try to rest soon." "Soon," I agreed, though I knew sleep was far from my mind. The legal clause, for all its complexity, had faded into the background. What lingered was the weight of her insight, the quiet presence that had calmed my frustration, and the unsettling awareness that my feelings for her were deepening into an uncharted territory I hadn't anticipated. It wasn't just curiosity anymore, it was a profound, almost aching sense of recognition. I felt a growing hum of something new, a sensation that both disoriented and excited me. I knew, with a certainty that settled deep in my core, that the line between employer and employee had blurred irrevocably. After that late night, an invisible shift occurred between us. Camila, while still impeccably professional, carried herself with a subtle new tension. Her gaze would occasionally linger on me a moment longer than necessary. She started anticipating my nonverbal cues with even greater precision, almost as if she were reading my thoughts. I knew she felt it too, this growing unspoken presence between us. Her military training had clearly instilled in her a profound sense of control, discipline, and rigid boundaries. My playful intrusions, my attempts to connect on a human level, were now actively challenging that ingrained order. I saw it in the slight waver in her hand when she handed me my coffee, in the way she would sometimes stare out the window for a prolonged moment, lost in thought. She was fighting a silent battle within herself, and I, the instigator, found myself watching with a mix of anticipation and concern. One afternoon, a particularly aggressive online smear campaign erupted, targeting the Foundation's latest initiative. It was baseless, malicious, and frankly, quite ugly. I was already exhausted from a packed schedule, and the sudden onslaught of negativity left me feeling exposed and vulnerable. I retreated to my study, feeling the weight of public scrutiny press down on me. Camila, who typically maintained a respectful distance, came to the door. "Miss Caldwell? Is everything all right?" Her voice was softer than usual, a faint note of concern breaking through her usual composure. "Just another charming day in the public eye," I mumbled, staring blankly at the vitriol on my tablet. "It's relentless." She stepped into the room, something she rarely did uninvited. She stood silently for a moment, her gaze sweeping over my slumped posture, the glow of the screen illuminating the harsh words. Then, with a quiet deliberation that surprised me, she walked to my side and picked up a small, smooth river stone from my desk, a little trinket I kept as a paperweight, placing it gently in my palm. "My sergeant used to say," she began, her voice low and steady, "that some battles aren't fought with weapons. They're fought with resilience and the ability to filter out noise." She held my gaze, her expression conveying a quiet solidarity that bypassed words. It was a simple gesture, but its impact was profound. I looked up at her, my eyes swimming with unshed tears. Her face was calm, her gaze steady, offering a silent strength rather than pity. There was a shared presence in that moment, a quiet understanding that made the weight of the online attacks feel lighter. She nodded once, a subtle acknowledgement, then stepped back to her vigilant stance near the door. The moment was over, but its resonance lingered. The small stone in my hand felt suddenly heavy, imbued with her quiet strength, her thoughtfulness. Camila was fighting her own internal war, but in that brief, unguarded moment, she had offered me a lifeline, a shared solace that went beyond any professional duty. And in doing so, she had chipped away another piece of the formidable wall she had built around herself, leaving her more exposed and deeply affecting me in return. The river stone became a silent talisman. I kept it on my desk, a small, smooth reminder of Camila's quiet solace. The online attacks eventually subsided, as all such things do, but the memory of her unexpected gesture remained, deepening the unspoken currents between us. Camila, however, seemed to retreat slightly after that. Her vigilance was still impeccable, but she added an extra layer of formality, a subtle re-establishment of boundaries. I caught her watching me sometimes, her expression unreadable, a hint of something conflicted in her eyes. I knew she was grappling with the emotions that had been stirred, the vulnerabilities that had surfaced. One rainy Saturday, I had canceled all my appointments, seeking refuge in the quiet of my home. Camila was present, of course, a silent sentinel. I found her in the library, looking at a specific shelf, her finger tracing the spines of books on military history. "Interested in the classics, Camila?" I asked, my voice soft, not wanting to startle her. She turned, her usual composed expression in place. "Miss Caldwell, just browsing. This section is extensive." "It is," I agreed, moving closer. My grandfather was quite the enthusiast. He believed understanding history was understanding the future, and sometimes understanding ourselves. I paused, then continued, my voice barely a whisper. Sometimes the quietest stories hold the most weight. I looked at her, searching her eyes. You know, Camila, you don't always have to be so impenetrable. It's okay to put down your guard, at least here with me. Her jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Miss Caldwell, my purpose is clear. My guard is for your protection. It is non-negotiable. Is it? I challenged gently. Or is it also for yours? Her gaze locked with mine, and for a long, stretched moment, the air in the library crackled with unspoken tension. I saw the fight in her eyes, the familiar resistance, the struggle to maintain control. But then, something shifted. A flicker of something raw, something exposed. There are things, she began, her voice rough, barely above a whisper. Experiences that don't leave you, even when you leave the field. She didn't elaborate, but the words carried the weight of 1,000 unspoken stories. It was a fragment, a carefully chosen piece of her past, offered with immense effort. My heart ached for her, for the burden she carried. I stood there, offering a gentle, knowing look that spoke volumes of my willingness to listen, to understand, without pressure. I understand, I said, my voice equally quiet. You don't have to carry it alone, Camila. You don't have to fight all your battles by yourself anymore. Her eyes, usually so guarded, softened then, a profound yearning emerging from their depths. It was an admission, a silent surrender to the inexplicable pull that had been growing between us. In that moment, the barrier dissolved, leaving behind a shared space of vulnerability and a recognition of the deep affection that had taken root. I held her gaze, and the air around us became thick with unspoken words, with the quiet acceptance of a connection that had finally broken through. The library became our sanctuary after that. Not for grand conversations, but for quiet understanding. Camila didn't suddenly spill all her secrets, but the careful control she exercised over her emotions loosened. She allowed herself to be present, truly present, in a way she hadn't before. The silence between us was no longer just comfortable, it was rich with unspoken affection. One late evening, after a particularly draining board meeting where I'd faced harsh criticism for the Foundation's outreach strategy, I found myself slumped on the couch in the living room, my head in my hands. The politics, the endless maneuvering, it often left me feeling hollow. Camila, who had been preparing my evening tea, walked over and set the cup on the coffee table. She didn't ask what was wrong. She simply sat beside me, leaving a respectful but close space between us. I felt the familiar, quiet strength emanating from her, a steady presence that began to soothe my frayed nerves. It's just sometimes it feels like I'm constantly fighting uphill, I confessed, my voice muffled. Trying to do good and getting tangled in so much red tape and ego. She was silent for a moment, then she spoke, her voice a low murmur. It takes a different kind of courage to fight a battle you can't see, Miss Caldwell. Your battles are often unseen, but no less demanding. I slowly lifted my head, looking at her. Her profile was illuminated by the soft lamplight, showcasing the elegant curve of her neck, the resolute set of her jaw. There was a profound empathy in her eyes, a shared weariness that resonated deeply within me. Camila, I whispered, her name feeling different on my tongue now, infused with a new tenderness. I met her gaze, and in that look, there was a silent acknowledgement of everything we'd built together. She started, her voice catching. I don't know. I'm not used to this. Her gaze held mine, a faint flush rising subtly on her cheeks. I know, I said, my tone gentle. It's okay. We can figure it out together. Her eyes searched mine then, and in their depths, I saw a profound surrender, a letting go of the internal struggle she had waged for so long. There was fear there, yes, but also a burgeoning hope, a quiet acceptance. The air thrummed with unspoken emotions, with the weight of everything we had navigated to reach this point. Slowly, carefully, I leaned in. She didn't move, her breath hitching almost imperceptibly. Our eyes were locked, a silent question passing between us, a silent affirmation. And then our lips met. It was a brief, soft touch, a gentle exploration that conveyed more tenderness than passion, more profound emotional courage than anything else. In that soft communion, years of guardedness fell away, replaced by the warmth of a connection that had finally found its true form. It was a moment of profound emotional courage for Camila, a silent promise between us, a new beginning. Days later, we faced our first real test as a couple navigating a professional dynamic. While attending a high-profile gala, a group of protesters breached the venue's perimeter, shouting accusations about the foundation and pushing past security. Camila instantly shifted into protection mode, positioning me behind her and scanning the crowd for threats. But in the chaos, she never lost sight of me, checking in with a quick glance every few seconds. When the situation calmed, she turned to me, her usual composure shaken slightly. "Are you all right?" she asked, her voice tight with concern. I nodded, reaching for her hand briefly before pulling back, mindful of onlookers. "I'm fine, thanks to you." Later, in the car on the way home, the tension of the night hung in the air. Camila stared straight ahead, her jaw clenched. I should have anticipated the protest. It was a failure in my assessment. I placed a hand on her arm, stopping her self-criticism. "It wasn't your fault. You kept me safe, and that's all that matters." And I hesitated, then spoke plainly. "I'm glad you were there, not just as my bodyguard, but as you." Her shoulders relaxed slightly, and she glanced at me, a small, genuine smile tugging at her lips. "I'm glad too." As we pulled into the driveway, I turned to her. "Stay tonight." "Not as my guard. Just stay." She paused, then nodded. Inside, we sat in the kitchen, sipping warm tea, and talked about the gala, about the foundation, about nothing and everything. And when she leaned in to kiss me again, it was softer than the first time, a quiet confirmation of the bond we'd forged. It was a reminder that even in the chaos of our lives, we had found something steady, something real. Life with Camila continued to unfold, now with a quiet understanding that deepened with each passing day. Our routine was still present, but it was imbued with an intimacy that transcended professional duties. The subtle glances, the shared smiles, the knowing silences, all spoke volumes about the profound connection that had blossomed between us. Camila, once a fortress of unyielding discipline, had allowed herself to soften, to open. The weight of her past experiences hadn't disappeared, but with my quiet support, the sharp edges of her trauma began to dull. She found solace in our shared moments, in the quiet companionship that filled our lives. I saw the healing in her eyes, a quiet peace that settled there, replacing the restless vigilance. She began to offer observations about the world around us that weren't strictly security-related, a comment on a beautiful sunset, a quiet appreciation for a piece of music, a wry observation about human nature that always made me smile. It was like watching a flower bloom in the desert, slow and deliberate, but breathtakingly beautiful. For me, Zoey Caldwell, who had always known a certain kind of privilege and ease, I discovered a depth of love and understanding I never anticipated. Camila had brought a grounding force into my life, a quiet strength that made the chaos of my world feel manageable. She challenged me to be more present, to appreciate the subtleties, to find courage in vulnerability. Our love wasn't a whirlwind romance. It was a slow, steady burn, built on trust, respect, and a genuine desire to truly see and understand one another. We still faced the complexities of our unique dynamic. The world still saw her as my bodyguard, and us as employer and employee. But in the quiet moments, in the sanctuary of our shared space, we were simply Zoey and Camila. We navigated the subtle glances, the unspoken questions from others, with a quiet strength that only strengthened our bond. Our journey together was far from over. It was an ongoing exploration, a continuous unfolding of two lives that had, against all odds, found their way to each other. The path ahead was still uncharted, filled with the unknown, but we faced it together, hand in hand, two women from different worlds, forever bound by an unexpected, profound love that continued to grow and evolve. Our story was just beginning, a testament to the unexpected connections that can heal, transform, and redefine what it means to truly belong.